Hello everybody, welcome back to the Game & Muscle YouTube channel and welcome back to RaceRoom Racing Experience, where in this video I'm going to be telling you how to RaceRoom. Specifically, what you need to do if you want to get into RaceRoom and join us when we're racing RaceRoom on our live streams. I'll explain how the content works. I'm going to explain some of the force feedback, what force feedback I'm using and the force feedback changes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the latest update that happened in December, including the new DLC or cars, because RaceRoom is basically the ultimate DLC simulator. So to start things off, if you're coming to this afresh, or maybe you've got some basic RaceRoom content, but you want to join us, you're going to want to know what to get. So here we go. We'll load up the store in-game, and I'll explain how the RaceRoom content system works. Now, as a warning, RaceRoom's sales model is possibly one of the worst in sim racing. If it wasn't for iRacing, it would be the worst in sim racing. But the way it works is you basically... For online, if you want to join a server, you need at least one car that's racing on that server, and you need the track that's racing on that server in that current session. So say a server has GT3, but then is running like 15 different tracks on rotation, you would need one GT3 car, or they call them GTR3 in this, but you'd need one GT3 car and the current track that's racing. So what that means is, if you want to save money and you want to get into RaceRoom as cheap as possible and just join in our races as cheap as possible, what I would recommend doing is basically buying one of the starter packs or the pro pack, which gets you a bunch of cars and a bunch of tracks, and then trying to get as many tracks as possible, ideally the tracks that you know you'll want to race and the tracks that will likely be racing on our server, which will typically be stuff like Spa, Brands Hatch Indy, Norse Ring, you know, all the good tracks. If it looks like a track that a real race series like BTCC would run at, then we will probably be running it on our server. Bear in mind, we also run the three free tracks that are in this. There's like the RaceRoom Raceway and Portimao, which you get totally, even if you've not paid for anything, you get that in the sim. So you'd get the a starter pack ideally. You'd buy the tracks that are decent tracks. You know which ones they are. And if you want to join with GT3, you would buy one GTR3 or one GT3 car, and personally I would recommend buying the new Porsche that's just come out in the December pack, but all the GT3 cars are really nice in RaceRoom Racing Experience. I would also really recommend buying the FR90 V8 car, or just the FR90 pack for RaceRoom Racing Experience, because we're going to be racing those cars as well, as they're really fun to drive. Now, when it comes to actually putting your money and giving it to KW Sector 3 RaceRoom Racing Experience, the cheapest way to do things is to buy VRP by going through the RaceRoom store, buying like one of their VRP bundles and then applying that to your account. It'll end up saving you from if you just to buy stuff using Steam credit. I know it's ridiculous, isn't it? Oh, well, what about just buying the game and joining in and driving? Wouldn't that be nice and convenient? No, this is RaceRoom. This is DLC room. You got to make it as hard as possible for the consumer to get into the sim. So I'll put a link in the description for this video for the VRP if you want to do that and save money and get into it. But yeah, buy the VRP, maybe buy the Pro Pack or the Starter Pack, buy some tracks, and buy the FR90 and a GT3 car. And chances are you will then be able to join in with us online for the racing. It's worth saying as well, a positive side of RaceRoom is you can try all the cars out for free. So if you're not sure, if you want to try a different GT3 car, you're like, oh, do I know if it'll handle in a way that I like? You can just try it out offline. It's built into the game, and you can see what you think of it. So that's nice. At least they've done that with the sim. And as I say, you do have some free tracks that are free. It's not like iRacing free where you pay a monthly subscription. There is actual free content in this, so it's worth getting RaceRoom anyway, just to check it out and see if you like it. Right, I think that pretty much explains that aspect of getting into the sim if you want to join us. Let's go back to the main menu here, back to the game, and let's talk a little bit about... Let's do our force feedback settings and get that out of the way. It's quick as possible, speedy. So with the latest update, the December update, They've changed the force feedback in the sim quite a bit. And they've also changed the physics quite a bit. So your previous force feedback settings and car settings and stuff are likely to not work properly. So really, what you want to do, if you're using like a T300, FANATEC CSLE or G29, is you're probably going to want to delete your old profiles and start afresh. When it comes to the force feedback settings, what I would say is I found that the defaults were actually really pretty quite good. I think I've just made something up there. They were quite good. I'm using the FANATEC DD1, the FANATEC Podium, which gives you like a sort of raw force feedback from any simulator you use. So from using this, I can kind of guess what it'd be like on the other wheels. I mean, I've owned a G25, I've owned a T300, I've owned a TSPC Racer, I've owned a T500. I have a good idea of what different force feedback wheels tend to be like and what sims how they tend to respond to different sims force feedback. But me being me and not having a life, I decided to fiddle with the force feedback with this wheelbase, with the DD wheelbase, to get it as nice as possible for my personal preference. And I'll tell you what settings I've got here for those of you that maybe have a DD. And these settings will probably work well, give or take, if you've got a CSL Elite, if you've got a Simucube 2, or you've got another DD wheel. So the force feedback intensity is on 100. That's like the overall strength, pretty self-explanatory. I turn smoothing, force feedback spring, force feedback dampener all to 0. Smoothing is basically like an in-game dampener. I find generally with the Simucube 1, I always preferred using the dampening that's on for the DD wheel, like in the Simucube software. And that's probably the case with the DD2, and the same with the FANATEC DDs. I always prefer using the dampening that's built into the device rather than what comes out of a simulator. That's just me. So 100% on the strength, all those on 0. And now here's the actual force feedback settings as they relate to what you're going to feel from the game. The steering force intensity I put on 80. Again, you can kind of see this is like just being a strength setting, an overall strength setting. But 80 seems to be a good value. If you want your force feedback to be a little bit weaker, you can turn that down. The force feedback minimum force is on 0. If you turn that up, I always find you end up with like this weird little notch in the centre of your steering. That might not be the case on like a G25, 27 and 29 because... or even like a T300, you might want to use minimum force, because what it does is it sort of moves moves things along a bit so that the forces start at a level where your wheel will pick them up for wheels that kind of have weaker motors. But for DD wheels, and I think most wheels, to be honest, probably don't want minimum force on. Understeer I've got set to 55. The understeer effect in this is really nice. What it is as the fronts lose grip, the force feedback gets lighter, which is very handy for braking, because if you're braking really hard and you're locking the front wheels up and you're starting to understeer, the force feedback gets light, so you know you're pushing the brake too hard before actually locking up, which is great. Something that all simulators should have. If you put this on sort of 55 or even higher than this, you probably will find that the understeer effect's quite aggressive in this, and it will make your force feedback feel quite on and off, especially if you're very aggressive when you accelerate and brake. I like that immediacy and directness from the force feedback, but if you're coming from some of the other simulators, you might want to run less on the understeer effect so the fall off isn't as dramatic. Having the understeer effect on this high could give you the impression that you're like, oh, the car's got no grip now. Oh, now it's got tons of grip, and it can make the force feedback a little bit yanky. But I like that. So 55 there. Vertical load is how much the force feedback weights up as the vertical load increases. So as you go faster, there'll be more vertical load. The downforce pushes the car to the ground, and so it's harder to turn the car. Gives you a really good sensation of speed, and it also helps you to drive a little bit more stably through corners like Eau Rouge. I know that's not the real corner, but you know what I mean. Through the up corners, or the Schumacher S's, or anything where you're a high speed corner and you just want that little precision, because the car's obviously more sensitive at high speed. If you turn that up, obviously it gets stronger the faster you go. But 42 I found to be a nice value. Lateral force, apparently according to RaceRoom, is the degree the lateral forces on the front tyres affect the force feedback. I've just found to put that to 42. I mean, supposedly it's a lateral force on the tyres that affects that, how strong that sort of, as you go in and the forces change, how strong the force feedback will be. I'm not quite sure how that correlates, but 42 seemed like a good number after fiddling with everything. You kind of have to, with these settings on this, they all kind of like mix together into a super force feedback. So that's why if you really want to, if you have something specific in mind, you probably will find yourself fiddling with this for a long time. Now, outside of that, those are the main force feedback effects. You do have these sort of effects. The effects that are kind of almost canned effects, if you will. They're not really driven from the telemetry or from the actual physics. They're driven from specific events in the game. Now, what I found is the slip effect is, on a DD wheel at least, by default, is very overactive. So, very high pitch. The actual vibration from it feels like a toothbrush. So what I did was I went in the C users, username, documents, my game, SIMBin, RaceRoom Racing Experience, user data, control set, and the profile that I'm currently on here, the FANATEC Podium DD1 custom .rcs file. That's got to be the longest directory name in the history of man. What I did is I went into that RCS file, which has all the options for, you can actually tweak the force feedback even more here if you're that mental. But I went to the force feedback slip frequency multiplier, which affects the actual nature of this slip effect, and I changed it from 1.0 to 0.2. Now what that does is it changes the frequency of the rumble for the slip effect, and 0.2, to me, it makes the frequency a lot more drawn out. Rather than being high vibration, it's more of a drawn out vibration, which to me, on this wheelbase at least, makes it feel a lot more like actual tyre slip in a car, from my experience of like go-karts and being around a track in a real car. Though I've only been around a track in a road car, a Honda Type R, and I don't know, some other road cars with road tyres, which obviously the slip on them, the vibration from them is probably going to be a lot lower frequency than the vibration on a racing slick, which is like, you know, they're tighter, there's a larger contact patch. But regardless, I just found that the slip effect on 4% and that setting in that RCS file felt a lot better to me. So you can, I think a lot of people, to be honest, will probably want to just turn the slip effect off and not use it, because it is a little bit artificial. And then you've got the curb vibrations, which again, it's just a vibration when you go over curbs. I find 4% on this wheel base is a good amount. Everything else I just turn totally off because they're not really needed. You probably don't really need any of these on anyway, but I like those two like that. It's just for a bit of fun, a bit of extra noise. So that's that in terms of the actual simulator. Let's talk about the settings that I'm using on the FANATEC itself. Obviously this will only apply to the FANATEC CSLE Elite PS4 and the DD wheels that can use the FANALAB software. One thing with RaceRoom is with DD wheels, and maybe with the CSL Elite, but with DD wheels especially, RaceRoom's force feedback is always, in my opinion, has always been a little bit overactive, and so you kind of have to calm it down a bit with dampening. Now, the downside of that is the more dampening you put on, the less information, less sort of immediacy you get from the actual simulator, the less sort of direct feel you get, but dampening will calm things down, and with the DD wheel that's not necessarily a problem. If you're using a T300 or a G29, you probably don't want to use dampening at all, because those wheels already innately dampen or don't have particularly powerful motors in them, so the dampening will just remove all information from the sim. But for the DD wheel, what I did find is these settings I'm using with the FANATEC Podium. We've got the steering angle on automatic, so it just sets it based in the game, which actually RaceRoom is fixed now. It seems to all work properly. There was problems with that in the past. Overall force feedback strength I've set to 90. Vibration strength is set to 50. I mean, that's not even being used. Oh no, that's on the wheel rim for like braking and stuff. Threshold brake, that's 100, so brake sensitivity is just on. Yeah, that's, you know, some of these settings are more for like the vibration motors in the wheel rim. The main one, the reason why I actually wanted to show this though, is the dampener effect strength. So if you want to use the dynamic dampener, and specifically if you want to remove the overactive force feedback at the center when going at high speeds in RaceRoom, and you've got a FANATEC CSL Elite, PlayStation 4 or Podium, if you set the game dampener effect strength to say 20% or so, and then you use the dynamic force feedback setting, and you put speed sensitive on, this setting will add dampening to the wheel in the range that you set here. So the dampener effects range is within 15 degrees of the wheel. The dampener will kick in above 99 kilometers per hour, and it means that when you're going down the straights, you're not going to get these big oscillations. The wheel will just steady down. The downside of this is when you're driving, you do feel that sort of dampener in the centre, and it doesn't sort of blend in with everything else perfectly, but it does calm things down a bit. I would say the oscillations seem to be made a lot worse if you're using a larger wheel rim, probably because it's a larger wheel rim, so the nature of the nature of the wheel rim size now, that affects the actual input and output from the force feedback. But also I think the inertia from the wheel rim magnifies that issue where things can oscillate. If you're using like a Formula rim or a GT3 rim, then you probably won't need to use this at all. You could just use the basic game dampening. But let's try and get through this as quick as possible. Don't want you all to die of old age coma here. What I'd also say is when you've got that speed dampener set up, it is using the dampener. You have to have the game dampener on for the dynamic dampener to work. And the higher you set this, the more that this will apply. So if you don't want it on whilst you're playing, or you want to tweak it, you can just set this up like it is there in the FANALAB software, and then just use your wheel rim at a later date, or whilst you're driving the cars, to then adjust it on the wheel to get it to how you want it to be. But enough of that, because not everyone has FANATEC wheels. So all in all, though, the actual force feedback has massively improved. I think it's more informative, and I think it's better across the board than it was previously. I know some people really love it now, and some people hate it, but that's just the world of force feedback. So let's go to do a single event here. I'm going to pick the Porsche GTR 2019, GT3R 2019, and we'll race with AI. A good thing about RaceRoom is, of course, that you do have AI offline racing. I'd say the AI is sort of pretty good. It's reasonably good. Like, you can practice with it, you can have a good time with it, but they are a little bit aggressive at times, and they are a little bit slow at the start, and there's certain situations where they could be better. But the AI is perfectly fine. I think, especially if you're maybe you're learning things, you're putting AI on a lower setting, it's fine. You can have a good time with it. So for me personally, AI difficulty on 105 is a nice challenge, especially if I'm starting at the back of the grid. So that's what I'm going to do. I think that's the equivalent of having the AI basically at 100%. Anything higher than that, I think they start cheating. But yeah, So we'll go to the Nürburgring here. Before we actually go to the track, they have added... Where's the new circuit? They have added another new track since the December update. I can't find it on here. But we've also got a new layout to the Nürburgring in the December update, which includes the fast chicane, which is really nice. The NGK chicane, rather than having to do that really slow chicane, you've got more the follow-through chicane, which I find really enjoyable. But let's drive. Do we need? We'll just skip them once we go. So you can set up how many cars you want. For the single player, you can set up quali and practice and stuff, and it's really quite a nice sim in terms of load up a sim. And assuming you've bought the car on the track, but in terms of load up the sim, get in and drive, you can get into it very quickly without fiddling too much and change the options. So if you like doing AI racing and you just want to do like a 15-minute race, somehow you've escaped your wife or your children, or you've got a gap in your work, you just want a quick 20-minute blast on the simulator. This is quite a good sim for that, without having to do too much fiddling, just get in and have a good time. So, what we'll do here is I'm going to talk a little bit about the new handling, the new physics, and whilst driving. So we'll skip this session. End session. There we go. It's quality. We go straight to race. We go start at the back here. Now, of course, RaceRoom. A really nice thing with RaceRoom is the audio is fantastic. But we already knew that. RaceRoom has some of the best audio in sim racing. I'd say maybe it's picked now by Assetto Corsa Competizione. I think that's got slightly better audio. But other than that, RaceRoom has really fantastic audio, really immersive, really gets you into the game. really, you know, I think you can really just zone out and just do laps in Race Room with AI as well, and have a good time. It's just a good sim for having a good time without too much pain. Another really nice thing with Race Room is because it's not the newest of games, it actually looks pretty decent. Because it's not the newest of game engines, it runs really well. So if you've got a lower end system that's you know, not state of the art, chances are you'll be able to whack Race Room on, have a ton of cars, and still be able to hit 100 plus FPS, or at least 90 FPS. So you know, maybe not on the highest settings, but on a lot of the settings, on medium to high, you should be able to do that on a fairly dated system. So in terms of the handling changes that have happened, the most noticeable thing is that the cars now that have been updated, they tend to pivot and rotate a lot better than they previously did. So they're a lot more easy to manipulate the cars. Oh, we've got a bit of an accident here. It's a lot easier, or you have a lot more control, a lot more fine control over the vehicles. I think whatever they've done to the physics and the tyres and everything that's changed, you just feel like you have a lot more control. That you have more agency over the vehicle as a driver, and for me personally, that just makes it more compelling to drive. I think with driving, like what normally defines a good car over a bad car is how much control does a driver have over the vehicle, and then after that, what are the innate handling qualities of the vehicle, so the specific nature. But primarily is that car control thing, and that's why cars like the Mazda MX-5 are so famous, because yeah, obviously a Mazda MX-5 in reality is really slow, and very muted compared to many other faster, more sporty cars and other vehicles. But fundamentally, with an MX-5, the driver is very, very much in control of it, and it's a very nimble vehicle. Hence, it's a good vehicle. Now, all the cars that are updated in Race Room, I'd say, are just on another level of driver control, as I say. A big thing I think's changed as well is that historically in Race Room, the brakes always felt a bit muted. Like, I always felt like the cars didn't really want to slow down or didn't slow down. It almost felt as if you always had like I don't know, like 60% brake pressure as a maximum brake pressure. But now you can definitely lock up the brakes a lot easier, and I feel like the cars actually slow down and respond to the brakes a lot easier. Maybe part of that might not be that the brakes are more or less effective, but I think maybe what's happening is because the cars are so much more agile and rotating, when you get on the brakes hard, you notice the effect of the brakes more, which again is really satisfying, because you can now use the brake and the accelerator much more, not just with this Porsche but with all cars in the game, to actually control the vehicle. And again, maybe this is my preference more so than it applies to everybody, but I'm one of those drivers that I really enjoy steering the car off the brake and the accelerator more so than the steering wheel. In my mind, the steering wheel is a device used to stop the car from spinning out of control. The steering wheel is like, it's the backup. Whereas I like the brake and the accelerator are what I want to be using to actually drive the car, balancing the power and making those tiny little adjustments on the brake and the accelerator to really hit the line that I want to be hitting through the corner. And I think Race Room's update, they've done a really good job on that in terms of making the simulator drive much more in a way that I like to drive. So, I mean, obviously the way I like to drive is the way that everyone likes to drive. So everyone will enjoy it. But so outside of that, I mean, and the handling improvements, as I say, seem to apply to all the cars. I was messing around with the force feedback and testing out the FR90 a lot, the McLaren and some of the other vehicles. They all seem to have the same general improvements, but of course they all handle different because they're different cars as well. So it's an absolutely fantastic job by Sector 3. Now, I mean, we are offline here, obviously, but a really great thing about RaceRoom is that the online in RaceRoom is really sort of well put together now. I mean, RaceRooms came out originally in like 2012, and they've basically just kept on working and polishing it, and RaceRoom has sort of, I think, become more and more one of the stronger sim platforms for stuff like league racing, and just high quality online racing, specifically when it comes to things like the netcode. You can have car contacts in RaceRoom online with someone with like 150 ping, and it's not going to like just randomly rotate you or fire you off the circuit. You know, you can have a little bit of door rubbing and it's not a problem, which is, I don't really know any other simulator that particularly allows that. Most sims online, when you have a car contact, you have a lot of trouble, unless you're playing with everyone that has a sort of sub 60-70 ping, so everyone's in the same rough location as you. Just killed him. Oh, takedown. What a pit manoeuvre. He had drugs in his car. I had to take him out. Now, what I would say, though, there is still one aspect to RaceRoom that's always been in RaceRoom with the car contacts, and that is if you are behind a car in front and you rear end that car in front because you've broke too late, you will, as the car that's doing the ramming, typically the front of the car goes down, bites in, and you just lose control of the vehicle. I don't think that's particularly realistic, but it does have the benefit that the car in front doesn't get penalised as much as the car behind hitting you. The car behind is the one that loses out, and that's good because it's normally the car behind's fault for ramming the car in front. In just about every other simulator, when a car behind rams the car in front goes flying, the car behind is perfectly fine. Where that can be a problem, though, is if you're racing against AI and you're really close and the AI brakes erratically and you drive into them and you spin off. That's a little bit annoying. But, you know, you can learn how to not drive into people. So get good, I think, is the answer to that. But, I mean, so the force feedback here is so good for letting me know how much grip I've got. And I'm modulating the throttle. I mean, I'm the type of driver that drives through force feedback rather than visuals. I do appreciate if you're like an alien, you kind of have to drive through visuals because there's inherent delay in all force feedback, and visuals are always going to be the least delayed aspect of the information you're getting from the sim. But I use the force feedback to know if I'm going into a corner too hot, to know if I'm applying too much throttle. There might not be any real movement of the front of the car through the corner, but you can feel from the force feedback if you're turning the steering wheel too much, because, you know, it starts getting lighter, and then once it gets to its lightest point, you're basically at the limit, and you essentially want to hold it at that point, or just slightly over that, and balance it there, and you've got the force feedback to let you know that you're doing that and you're doing that correctly. Whereas in some sims where you don't have that force feedback, especially for the front ends, you don't know. The only way you'll know is through trial and error of doing laps and maybe learning like the sort of visual appearance of things. But I drive by feel, so that's just my preference. And I think with the DD here, I mean, this feels absolutely fantastic. I'm getting really nice, also little details for the actual road surface. What more could you need, really? I'd quite like other simulators to be like this. I mean, as it is right now, I think we've basically got RaceRoom, Assetto Corsa. R-Factor 2's force feedback is very informative. But I think the force feedback in this really goes hand in hand with the new way the tyres work at the limit as well. You can actually overdrive the cars in RaceRoom. It gets hard, like you do have to be catchy on the wheel and you have to be ready for it. And you know, you can go over the limit so you just spin and you've lost it. But you can actually go over the limit on the brakes in this and still use the steering a bit, which again is something I think a lot of sims don't quite get right. So it really encourages aggressive driving, pushing, and then dialing it back down a bit, which ends up producing really compelling racing. So this is why you'll notice in our live streams we've been playing a lot more RaceRoom, and we will be playing a lot more RaceRoom at least for the next 4 or 5 months until Automobilista 2 comes out and Project Cars 3. I don't know when they're going to announce that, but I'm really hyped for them. But I think RaceRoom's now it's just turned into sort of like a really nice, solid platform. It's just a really nice, solid platform with the content not costing a huge amount of money and it being pretty accessible to get into. Now, you notice on the screen, I'm using the old UI. There's something called Web UI, which I haven't fiddled with yet, and I'll probably do a separate video on it sometime. But if you're watching this and you're getting into RaceRoom, once you've set everything else up, I highly recommend that you do a Google for Web UI and look at the UI options that you've got in RaceRoom, and you can make things look a lot nicer than they currently look on the screen here. That was a nice GT3 race. You see, we finished the race. We go to an external view. All the actual replay cameras are really nicely done in RaceRoom. It's just got to a point where it's just a very polished sim. It's kind of like, you know, it's a bit like how Automobilista became. Only I think Automobilistas kind of ended up being a bit more dated than RaceRoom. But let's get off there. There we go. So yeah, I mean that pretty much covers the main points I wanted to go over in this video. Make sure if you want to join us that you get, as I say, the GT3 cars or a GT3 car, and you can see what tracks we race. And then you could just get them one by one or buy a pack. Hopefully we'll maybe we'll have some more keys to give away soon. When we live stream RaceRoom, we often have keys that are give away for various content, which is nice. Helps make it cheaper for fans of the channel. So what I'd say is definitely click the subscribe button if you play RaceRoom and you want to join in with us when we live stream. You've got to click that bell as well. We live stream on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday at 5 PM normally. I'm not sure if we're going to be committing to that over the Christmas period. My laptop's not very good for driving simulators. I can't fit my SimLabs cockpit and DD wheel on the train. But in general, 5 PM Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So come and join us online when we do RaceRoom and other sims. Let me know in the chat if there's anything in particular you want me to cover with this that I haven't covered in this video. And also, click that like button if you haven't already. But hopefully that gets you sorted out into how to get into RaceRoom, what's happened with the updates. There's also a bunch of new cars, but I'm not going to go through them in this video because we've already been going for too long. 34 minutes, too long. So yeah, guys, hopefully that's helpful. I will see you in the next video we do. Thanks for watching, and goodbye, everybody.